My name is Elza Weinman. I was born July 1st, 1926, in Antwerp, Belgium. My mother was born in Antwerp too, and she came from a pretty wealthy family. My father's name was Jules Moet. He came from a very nice family, but he was born in Poland. And they came to Antwerp when I think he was like 2 years old. And he grew up in Antwerp. He was one of 10 siblings, and he was the youngest. In Antwerp at that time, they arranged the marriages. So they had arranged a meeting between my mother and my father. And it just clicked right away. And they did get married. My father was also in the diamond business. And my mother had her first child about a year and a half later, but that first child was born a sickly child, and that it was a boy, and that boy passed away. And then about a year later, she became pregnant again with my older brother, Henry, and in 1926 I was born, and then there was a gap. About 4 or 5 years later, my younger brother was born. His name was Easy. And we lived in a very beautiful house in Antwerp. I would say that our life was just a very quiet, easy life. Our life was just a wonderful life. I can't say that anything was lacking in my life as I grew up. And all the cousins, because my father had so many siblings, all the cousins always came together on Shabbos afternoon, and they always came to our house because my parents didn't mind having all these young people around with the noise or everything. So we had a good time. We had a good life. And this really went on until the war broke out. So I'm going to tell you about why we left and what happened on the 10th of May, 1940. I was at that time not even 14 yet, and we heard noise. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning or something. It was early, and it sounded, like my parents realized what it was. I, as a teenager, I didn't know what the noise was, but apparently they were bombing. They were bombing the outskirts. They did not bomb Antwerp. And of course there was a big commotion in the house, what to do, because, nobody knew what the future was going to be at that point. And my father, they started to look around the house, and what I still remember, my mother taking the basket where she used to put the linens, the dirty linens and the clean linens, and in there she put all the silver that we had in the house. And my father took that to the burrs, the diamond burrs, and they put it into the safe. He had a big safe there. When you think of it today, it's a joke, because that's the first place the Nazis went to. But who knew? We didn't know what to do. Anyhow, we each packed one suitcase. And with that suitcase, we left. Meanwhile, my father had spoken to the siblings that were in Antwerp, and we were all going to meet at La Panne in a certain hotel. Amongst his siblings was a young sister. She was the second one. My father was the youngest, and then she was the second youngest. No children, and her husband unfortunately had cancer. He was very sick. But so they arranged that the ambulance would take them to La Panne. So we all met in La Panne, and we were in a hotel there. And La Panne is really near the border, near the French border. And we stayed there. I don't exactly know how long. We didn't have any news. We didn't know what was going on because the radios were not working, and nobody knew if Belgium had been invaded or what. We didn't know. So my father's family decided that they're going back because they didn't see a danger. My mother, of blessed memory, who was a quiet woman, a wonderful, loving person, became like a lioness. She said, "We're not going back. We're moving on." She didn't care if the rest of the family. My father would have gone back with his brothers and sisters, but my mother said, "No, we're moving on." And so the rest of the family went back. And of course, a lot of them were deported. Afterwards, we only found that out after the war. And we started our journey. And our journey, when we left La Panne, we were taking a train to Paris. And we board the train, and the train starts to go when the bombs came. They were bombing the train. So they told us to get out of the train and go underneath, and to, that if you were underneath, you might be saved, Then it stopped after a while, and it didn't hit the train. Where the bombs went, I have no idea. But we went back on the train, and we went on, and we arrived in Paris. When we left Antwerp, my mother, one of her hobbies was to sew she had a sewing machine. And she made little pockets in her girdle, a lot of little pockets, and the diamonds were in there. So that, with diamonds you could travel, and it's always good to have if you have to have money, or you run out of money and you have diamonds on you. So this is what my mother did before she left. I do remember my mother taking us, my two brothers and I, and she put us in a taxi, and she told the driver to take us around Paris, to show us Notre Dame, the left bank, the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, everything from the outside. We didn't get out of the taxi. And what she said was, "I want you to remember Paris, because I don't know if we'll ever see Paris again." And this is the way my mother, this is where her thoughts. And I learned a lot about my mother while we escaped, because I didn't know that she had all this strength in her. And then we left Paris. We didn't stay too long anywhere. My mother was only wanted to move on until she got to the ocean, near the ocean, and over the ocean. She felt the danger, and she said, we have to move on. We can't stay long anywhere. And so we went to Bordeaux. We're getting to Bordeaux, and we checked into a hotel. I don't remember as much about Bordeaux as I did Paris. And my mother came back to the hotel one day, and she said that she heard that there was a Portuguese consul that was giving visas to Portugal. And so my mother took the passport, because we didn't have individual passports in Antwerp. It's not like here when a baby is born and you want to take the baby to Europe, the baby gets a passport. In Antwerp, we were written in my mother's passport. So she had that one passport. So my mother took her visa and she left. She left the hotel. I'm not questioning it, there's nothing to question. And she was gone for quite a long time. But she came back as tired as she was. She was smiling and happy as can be, and she was holding the passport like that, and she told us the story. And this is why I put this one and one together, because I didn't know the name of the consul or anything like that, or his story. But what my mother said, she was in a room with wall-to-wall people. And she was waiting to go in and get the visa. But the consul had his staff, and also I think in the movie, the rabbi, who came out, and they took the passports from the people who were in that room, as many as they could, and they went into the room of the consul. And the consul, as it shows in the movie, it was like an assembly line. One was issuing the visa, and the consul was signing it, and then he gave it to his staff, and the staff, whoever it was, came out to give back the passport to whom it belonged to. But when this man took my mother's passport, and she saw that he had so many passports in his hands, she got frightened. She said, what happens if my passport falls out of his hands? What happens if they mix it up? What happens? Without a passport, you're stateless. You can't do anything. And so she pushed herself until she stood in front of the door. And she waited. And she waited a long time. Because as these staff members came out, they called out the names of the passport, on the passport. So her passport wasn't the first one to come out. And so she waited, and she was so frightened, until she heard the name, and she got the passport. And so we left Bordeaux. And we took the train. And the train, before going to Spain, stops in Hendaye. And then you have to go over a bridge and catch the other train. They came to check the passports on the train. That means everybody was sitting in the train, and they looked at the passport. And then all of a sudden, we hear somebody calling out, Monsieur Jules Moet and family, please get off the train. And we get off the train. I was not even 14 at that time. Did I know of any danger? No, I didn't even think of it. But we were standing in the street there at the station, and my parents were panicking, naturally, and I think in my father's passport, it might have been written diamond dealer, but it could have been. I think they did put it down that way. And so we didn't know, my parents didn't know what was going to be happening. When somebody came over to my mother and whispered in her ear, "Give him money." And so that's what my mother then told my father. And he gave him money, and he let us go. Now, this could have gone both ways. This could have gone that he wouldn't take the money and we would have been dead, that, whatever. But he took the money. And we walked over the bridge and we caught the train in Spain. As we were crossing into Spain, of course, the train was pretty full of people, but I don't remember, except to see the landscape outside, or maybe we were very tired also. I know that we probably slept a little bit or whatever, but I don't remember feeling anything in, like you say, fascist type, or anything left from the, the Civil War at that time. My parents, of course, were happy as can be that this thing in Andai didn't turn out in the other way, because it was really a touch and go at that time. So once we got back on the train, we sort of relaxed again, And we were children, my two brothers and I, and we played and we laughed, and these children didn't feel the danger of anything. My parents went, we followed them, of course. That's what, but my parents must have been so happy that they were able to continue the trip. And then we arrived in Portugal. We arrived in Lisbon. And we stayed in a hotel in Lisbon, not for a very long time, because my parents decided to go to Estoril. And I mean, I don't have to tell you how beautiful Estoril is. It's a resort with a casino, magnificent hotels, and we stayed in a hotel. It was called the Hotel d'Angleterre, and the Belgian government was in the hotel at the same time as we were. In other words, they wanted to escape from the Nazis, because like France had Vichy and de Gaulle, they have Pétain and de Gaulle. The Belgian government party, some of them were Nazi sympathizers, whereas the other part wanted to escape. My father, of course, was talking with all these people from the government, and when they heard that he was a diamond dealer, they offered to send him to the Belgian Congo, which at that time was part of from Belgium. And they had the diamond mines. They had diamond mines in the Congo, and they were offering him, the sun and the moon and the stars, like a mansion and help and all kinds of things. And my father thought it was a wonderful idea. My mother said, absolutely not. What are we going to do in Africa? She said, how are you going to raise your kids? I mean, we were Orthodox Jews. I mean, modern Orthodox, but you go to the Congo, what are you going to do there? You're going to get kosher food or anything like this? My mother had a vision of the Belgian Congo, or all of Africa, as a matter of fact, and she said, no, we're not going there. And so that was it. That's why I say when I think back of my mother, who was just a real, unassuming, quiet person who could become so strong in her convictions at that time. Then when she said no, it was no. And my father just had to go along with it. When I was on the go, we were in Estoril, we were having a wonderful time, we went to the beach and this and that. So we had a wonderful time. We didn't feel the war or anything like that. But my mother wasn't happy. We're not across the ocean yet. So she hears. There's always rumors going around. And she hears that they're giving out visas to Venezuela. So she figured, well, what can we lose? And she gets the passports, she gets the visas to Venezuela. But there's no ship, no transportation going to Venezuela. There was very little going to America also at that point. And so we had a visa to Venezuela, and that was it. And then one day she heard that they were giving out transit visas to Mexico. And so she went, and she got these transit visas to Mexico. So here she was, my mother, my father, with visas to Venezuela, transit Mexico, but no ship, nothing to go on. Until one day, we heard, my mother and my father heard about this ship, the Kwanzaa. It was a ship that was going to go first to New York, because a lot of people were lucky enough to have American visas. And they were also waiting for transportation, which they couldn't get. And so I would say that really 3/4 of the ship, if not more, were people who were going to go to New York. And then that boat was going to go to Mexico, to Veracruz. And so we booked passage on that ship. What can I tell you about the ship? The ship, well, the cabin, it was not like you go on a cruise today. We had, bunk beds. The whole cabin was maybe a 2x2, and you had the beds that, the bottom and the top, and the bottom and the top. And, a ship. I wouldn't consider that a luxury liner. But everybody was happy to be able to get on the ship. So we went on the ship, and we traveled to New York. The weather was awful. Like I would say, you could maybe have 10 people in the dining room. Everybody else was sick in their cabins. It just storms and storms, and it was just a very bad trip. And we arrived in New York. Took a long time till we got to New York. The whole trip, I think I was on that boat for 6 weeks. But when we got to New York, of course everybody had family in the United States. The people who were lucky enough to be able to get off the ship, they got off the ship, and we, of course, were not even allowed to go on the pier, and our family was not allowed to go on board. So, but somehow they managed to. My mother had a sister here with a brother-in-law, and they were, of course, at the pier to greet us, and they brought us clothes and food, and and we saw them. We just talked to each other from the deck of the boat to the pier, and we had a very famous French actor on the boat. His name was Dalio. I don't know if anybody would remember. I didn't even know that he was Jewish, but he was. And he was on the boat. And I mean, the boat was really like overcrowded. But then from New York, I mean, all these people got off. And the boat continued to Mexico. That trip to Mexico, I would say, was wonderful because the weather was getting warmer, and then you didn't get seasick anymore. You could get on, you can sit outside and on a chair. The boat wasn't crowded anymore or anything like that, and so it wasn't bad going from New York to Mexico. And the boat arrives in Veracruz. And we were like 97 people on the ship still. That was it. And of course, we packed our suitcases and we got ourselves ready to disembark. And we get on top of the deck. And, because it's so nice to see our boat coming towards the ground, towards the pier. And then we knew we could get off after so many weeks of being on that ship. And we look, and on the pier there was a line of soldiers with rifles. And we couldn't figure out what this was until somebody came on board the ship. I guess it was from the Mexican government, and who said that our visas were not valid and we can't get off. And if somebody gets off, they go straight to jail. So here we were, not being able to get off the boat. And the boat turns around, and the boat is going back to Europe. Meanwhile, when you leave Portugal, you sort of give back your visas because you're entering different countries. So we didn't even know if we would be able to get into Portugal when we came back. And there were U-boats, and there were mines, and so it was, I would say, like a horror story. And there was only one lucky thing about it. He had to refuel. And he got permission to refuel in Norfolk, Virginia. And so we got to Norfolk, Virginia. Not on the main pier where the passengers get off, but where they refuel. And they're refueling the boat. Meanwhile, my father, who was fluent in English, had already, they allowed him to use the telegraph machine on the ship. And he already telegraphed, everybody was able to telegraph people, their families, so that our families were in Norfolk, Virginia when we came. But what my father also did, between Mexico and Norfolk, you pass different islands. One of them being the Bahamas, where the Duke of Windsor, who had abdicated the role of king in England because of Mrs. Simpson, was the governor. And my father sent him a telegram also and asked if he would take us in. But now we know that they were Nazi sympathizers, the two of them, so they didn't even answer us back. So nobody wanted us. And so they started to work with different organizations like the Quakers, the Hyers, the Joint Distribution Committee, and of course, the Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, and his Secretary of State, Cordell Hull. But Roosevelt didn't budge. He had no room for 97 people. And So it became, and meanwhile, the captain of the ship said, he said he's not waiting another day, he's leaving, you know. Meanwhile, there was a passenger on the ship, which I only found out much later. His name was Rand. And he contacted a maritime lawyer in Norfolk, Virginia, whose name was Morowitz, a Jew, which is very unusual to have a Jew as a maritime lawyer in Norfolk, Virginia. And he took our case. Of course, he wasn't going to charge or anything. He took our case, and he tried to find a way to stop the boat from being able to move from where it is. In other words, to find violations on that boat. And he contacted in Portugal, I don't know who he contacted there, and they were full of violations. Because he said it was a ship, like not a cruise ship, but passenger ship, which it really wasn't. There were only allowed so many people on the ship. He had much more. I mean, he found enough so that the boat could not move. Meanwhile, Mrs. Roosevelt got to know about our plight. And she called over one of the cabinet there that she was able to talk to and get things done with. And she said to him, I don't know his name, she said to him, go down to Norfolk, Virginia, go on the ship and interview the people and let me know what kind of people they are and what the story is there. And he came and he started to interview some people. I don't know if he interviewed my parents or not, I don't know. And after a few people, he contacted Eleanor, and he said to her, this is going to take us days till we finish interviewing everybody. These people are political refugees. They go back, they'll be killed, one way or the other. He said, we have to do something for them. And this is how we got a transit visa to America. And we were able to get off in Norfolk, Virginia. There were some people on the ship that my parents knew because the husband was in the diamond business. For some reason, the husband was already in America. And the wife and the two daughters, who were little girls at that time, she was not able to get a visa to America, and she was on the ship with us going to Mexico. So when we got to the pier in Norfolk, the husband was there too. So when they got off, they also went to New York. And we did too. But we went by car. I think my father took a driver or something. I don't know. And we did not take a train or anything. But what we wanted to do is to pass by Washington and give a big bouquet of flowers to Mrs. Roosevelt and a letter to thank her, if we couldn't do it personally, to thank her for what she did for us. Because without her, I mean, God knows, we wouldn't be here. And so we got to the White House, but she wasn't there. So we left the flowers and the note, and then we came to New York, where we started our new life. But we had only a visa for 30 days. So my father contacted here an immigration lawyer, and he started to work for us so that we were able to go to Canada for one day and one night, come back and have our immigration visa. So once we had that, our new life began. I don't know that I knew what the danger was until much later, when the war broke out here, where America went to war, first with Japan and then with Germany, that we found out about the concentration camps and all these things. And we went to demonstrations in Madison Square Garden. We begged Roosevelt to bomb the rails from the trains, that they couldn't make it to Auschwitz or anything, or to bomb the crematoriums, because they certainly knew where they were. And he just didn't do any of those things, because he was only out to win the war. And I must say, I mean, he did a good job. I mean, just as a Jew, I cannot say that I loved this president, because he could have saved so many people, so many people. There was so much room here, and he didn't do it. So, you know, it's ambivalence, you know. You win the war, thank God, and 6 million Jews died, but some of them escaped and, you know, made a new life for themselves also. But all these things only came to me much later in my life. And even today, I'm still learning new things. Look at you, you're videoing me with a story about the consul, Sousa Mendes, who really saved our lives. And I didn't know a thing about it until maybe a month ago. So things are still developing, stories are still coming out, and stories have to be told. Because pretty soon, that generation is not going to be there anymore. And so, you know, I always said, I went to see all these movies about the Holocaust, and I read about the Holocaust and all that thing. But I always say, unless you've been there, you can't really know what this was all about. You can see it, and you can cry about it, and I would say so many members of my family were deported. We never saw them again. How they died and when, we really don't know. And this is something that has to be retold. Because now, I mean, as I got older and older and older, I recognize the danger of certain things. I'm more aware of them. And it's something that I hope will never happen again. But we can't let this story die. And that's why I'm making a tape for you, but I also have my own tape that I made for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. They should play it and remember the story, and realize that they're living in a wonderful free country, but that things can happen, but it shouldn't. And this is the way I feel about everything. As I said, you're asking me if I ever felt the danger. The only time that I felt something strong in me was when we were on the pier in Norfolk, Virginia, and he was refueling, and like nothing was working out for us to get off. Nobody wanted us. And I heard my mother call out, "Please take the children. At least save the children." So my mother was ready at that point to separate us. Now, again, here I am, not even 14 years old. What do I know? Today, when I think of my mother saying that, it brings tears to my eyes. I mean, that all this time we went through things, and but my mother said, no, we don't separate, nothing at all. At this point, she knew the danger going back. And so she said, please take the children. Let at least save the children. So that was maybe the time when I felt that something was really dreadfully wrong. But I couldn't pinpoint it. And thank God, things turned out okay for us. We were the lucky ones. And now, thank God, I mean, I'm getting on in age, and I lost a lot of my family, my husband, my father, my mother. My 2 brothers are not here anymore. But I rejoice with my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandchildren who are just, they really adore me. I have to say it. I don't like to brag, but they do. And my great-grandchildren that I love, that I see a future. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I live for. Okay, this is Sousa Mendes, the man that I heard saved our lives. And if I would meet him today, I would absolutely first give him a big kiss, and I would tell him that what he did, that was something absolutely extraordinary, that take his own life in his hands by doing what he did and saving so many people from the hands of that Hitler, and so that people can continue their life, because if not, more than 6 million Jews would have died. And he was just a remarkable person, and I would try to become friendly with him, because I'm that type of a person. If I meet somebody who has done such great things and is responsible for my survival, I certainly would try to have some kind of a rapport with him, whether he's in Portugal or whether he would be here. I mean, today, I mean, you take your telephone or your email and you're in business, and you can keep some kind of how would I say this? Communication, and form a friendship, because this man deserves it. I would also, if I would have learned that, if I was able to afford it, and hopefully I did, heard of his plight, I would also ask him if I can help him in any way. And I would also try to contact people that he gave the visas to, who don't know his story and don't know how they treated him afterwards, that we could all have done something to make his life easier. And so I'm grateful to him for giving me back my life.